Picture your high school English teacher handing back an essay to you.
Oh, I can picture it.
Right, and it's just like bleeding red ink
Everywhere.
everywhere, and almost every single red mark is, aggressively circling a verb.
Yeah, the classic trauma.
Exactly. I mean, for millions of language learners, mastering English past tenses feels exactly like trying to solve a rigged math problem,
It really does.
You plug in the chronological formula, but somehow your teacher still tells you the answer is wrong.
Well, and that frustration, it stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of what grammar actually is. I mean, the traditional classroom teaches us to view tenses as static points on a rigid timeline.
Right, like a calendar.
Exactly. You point to yesterday, you use this specific verb form. You point to last year, you use that one. But, I mean, native speakers don't, consult a mental calendar before they open their mouths.
They really don't.
Yeah.
And welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. If you're listening to this, you likely already have a very strong command of the language. Maybe you're, fine-tuning your skills for an advanced exam like the CAE, the CPE, or the IELTS. Or maybe you're just fascinated by the underlying psychology of how humans communicate.
Which is fascinating in itself.
Right. Whatever brought you here, we have a set of source notes today that completely dismantles that grammar as math illusion. We're looking at how we refer to the past in English, but we're basically throwing the timeline out the window.
Well, we have to throw it out because if you view language purely as a timeline, you completely miss the nuance of human interaction.
Yeah.
The source material actually argues that grammar isn't an objective reality at all. It's like a highly subjective set of tools.
That's subjective reality.
Yeah. It's about narrative structure, information framing, and honestly, raw speaker emotion.
Wow. And the author of these notes actually shares a story about exactly what we just described. That classic red ink trauma.
Right.
They recall being a teenager, writing these complex essays and just drowning in corrected past tenses.
It's so demoralizing.
It is. And the implied message from the teacher's red pen is always like, you picked the wrong point on the timeline, you failed the math problem.
And that is it's a paralyzing way to learn. It makes you terrified to speak.
Totally.
But the notes propose this massive perspective shift. Like, what if we stop thinking of tenses as hands on a clock and start thinking of them as different camera lenses on a movie set?
Okay, I love that. I want to hold on to that cinematic metaphor for this entire deep dive because I feel like it perfectly captures the psychology here.
It really does.
Because the event itself, right, the factual thing that happened in reality, that's the script.
Right, and that doesn't change.
Exactly. But as the speaker, you are the director. You get to choose which lens to, screw onto the camera to dictate exactly how your listener, the audience, basically experiences that scene.
That is exactly the core thesis we are unpacking today. Tenses in English don't just mark time. They force a specific viewpoint. They manipulate the listener's perception of duration, and they establish the emotional connection between different events.
Okay, so let's step onto the director's set then and look at our first two lenses. We need to frame an action, and we need to frame the background of that action.
Right.
So if I walk up to you and say, I missed the bus yesterday, that paints a very specific picture.
It does.
But if I change the verb and say, I was waiting for the bus when it started raining, I'm doing something completely different to your brain.
Oh, entirely different.
Yeah.
Let's look at the cognitive load of both choices, right? The past, simple, I missed the bus. That's your wide establishing shot.
Yeah.
It gives the listener a completely finished action. The plot has moved forward. The door is closed. The action is entirely enclosed in the past.
Like a done deal.
Exactly. Your brain processes it as a single, solid brick of information.
So it's factual. I missed the bus. End of scene. But when I swap out the lens and use the past continuous, I was waiting for the bus, I'm not just handing you a fact anymore. I am like dragging you into the scene with me.
You are. You're zooming the camera in and doing a slow tracking shot right in the middle of the ongoing duration of that moment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you aren't just reporting it. You are world building. You are setting the mise en scène.
And it triggers something psychological in the listener, doesn't it? Like if I just walk into a room, look at you and say, I was waiting for the bus, and then I just go completely silent.
Yeah, I'm going to stare at you.
Right. You are going to stare at me waiting for the other shoe to drop. It creates a literal physical sensation of suspense.
Well, because the continuous iming suffix, it acts as a cognitive open tab.
An open tab. I like that.
Yeah, it inherently signals to the listener's brain that the action is in progress and unclosed.
Yeah.
Human psychology craves narrative resolution, you
Oh,
know.
really do.
So when you use that continuous lens, you are basically holding the listener hostage. You're demanding an interruption.
You are forcing them to ask, like, and then what happened?
Precisely. Which perfectly sets the stage for something else to intersect it.
Right.
In the source note scenario, that intersecting event is the sudden, past, simple action, when it started raining.
Oh, okay.
The waiting is the broad canvas you painted, and the rain is the sharp, sudden splash of contrasting color splattered right across it.
That's a great visual.
Yeah, as a speaker, you use both lenses together to create a dynamic, multi-layered scene rather than just reciting a flat chronological list of things that happened to you.
So we've seen how the continuous pulls the listener right into the middle of a past moment, but that raises a major problem, doesn't it?
What's that?
Well, what if that moment never actually stopped? Like, how do we map something that started yesterday but is still actively ruining my day right now?
Okay. Now we are entering the territory of the perfect tenses, the shadow of the present.
Wait, hold on. I'm stopping you right there.
Okay.
You said this deep dive is entirely about referring to the past. The source notes literally call this the present perfect.
Right, they do.
So if our mission is to analyze history, why on earth are we dragging a present tense into the conversation? I mean, you're breaking your own rules here.
It's a completely fair challenge, really. And it highlights the great paradox of English grammar terminology.
Okay.
The present perfect is named for the present, yes, but it is deeply, inextricably anchored in the past. To stick to our cinematic metaphor, if the past simple is a wide shot, the present perfect is a match cut.
A match cut, like when a director visually links two completely different scenes across time by matching the shape of an object.
Exactly.
Like a bone flying into the air and turning into a spaceship.
Exactly that. The present perfect visually and psychologically links the past scene directly to the present scene.
Okay, I see.
Let's take the first scenario from the notes. I've missed the bus 3 times this week. Factually, the physical action of missing those buses is over.
Right, they're gone.
Yeah, the doors closed, the buses drove away in the past.
But by choosing the present perfect lens instead of the past simple, I am forcing you, the listener, to look at my current reality.
Yes.
Because the time frame this week is still happening.
You are telling the listener, look at the state I am in right now because of these historical events.
Wow.
The grammar actually forces the listener to prioritize the current consequences over the past action itself.
It's a highly relevant psychological link, but, the notes don't stop there. They contrast that with the continuous version.
They do.
What happens if I change the script to, I've been waiting here for an hour?
Oh, that is where the psychological weight really drops on the listener.
It feels incredibly heavy. Like, I've been waiting. It sounds so exhausting compared to just saying, I waited.
It sounds exhausting because you are actively transferring your exhaustion to the listener through syntax.
Whoa, really?
Yeah. The continuous form in the present perfect shifts the focus entirely away from the result and squarely onto the unbroken, agonizing duration of the activity leading up to this exact second.
So you're dragging them through the mud of that past hour with you.
Exactly.
You're grammatically demanding that they feel your pain.
That is the pragmatic brilliance of it.
Mm-hmm.
You aren't just presenting a timeline of events. You are using the continuous aspect to force them to experience the duration.
Okay, so if the present perfect is our match cut, connecting a past event to our current reality, how do we edit a movie that jumps entirely backward?
Back into the past.
Yeah, what if I want to tell you a story about something that happened deep in history before another thing that is also in history?
Then you have to utilize the heavy machinery of the linguistic editing room. The past perfect.
The past before the past.
Exactly.
I feel like this is where we get to play Christopher Nolan with our storytelling. Because, as a director, you don't have to tell a story in a strict, boring, chronological A to B to C order.
You really don't.
You can start right in the middle of a chaotic scene and then use the past perfect to trigger a sudden flashback without losing your audience.
It is the ultimate tool for nonlinear narrative.
Yeah.
Let's analyze the scenario provided in the text. By the time I arrived, the film had started.
A heartbreaking scenario, by the way. I mean, missing the opening credits is a tragedy.
A cinematic tragedy, but a grammatical triumph.
Fair enough.
Think about what the brain has to process here. Both events, your arrival at the theater and the film beginning, are completely dead and buried in the past.
Right.
But you, the speaker, want to sequence them without sounding like a toddler giving a book report saying, first the movie started and then later I arrived.
Oh, right. That clunky chronological sequencing is awful to listen to. It's so robotic.
It is.
So instead, I use I arrived as my main anchor point. That's my past simple wide shot, but had started acts as the flashback cue.
The auxiliary verb had is basically a flashing neon sign telling the listener's brain, warning, we're jumping further back in time than our anchor point.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
It organizes the narrative hierarchy instantly.
And just like before, the notes push us to look at the continuous version of this flashback, right? The example is, I had been studying for hours before the exam began.
Let's break down the cognitive mechanics of that sentence. We have the anchor point, the exam began, that is our fixed past reality.
Right.
But then we attach had been studying. We are taking that deep past flashback and we are stretching it out like a rubber band.
Stretching it out. So we are emphasizing the grueling, unbroken duration of the studying before the already past anchor point of the exam starting.
Exactly. Think about how much complex information you are conveying just through those 3 words. Had been studying.
That's a lot.
You are giving the listener the exact sequence of events. You are forcing them to feel the agonizing duration of the earlier event, and you are implying a direct cause and effect relationship between the studying and the exam.
Wow.
All of that data is transmitted seamlessly without ever having to explicitly state the timeline. The grammar does all the heavy lifting.
It's incredibly efficient. So we've completely mapped out how these camera lenses sequence events, right? How they zoom in for background context and how they execute match cuts and flashbacks.
We have.
But the source material reveals a final layer to all of this. And honestly, for an advanced speaker, I think this is the most critical part of the deep dive.
I agree.
Because sometimes English past tenses aren't about sequencing time at all. Sometimes they are pure, unadulterated emotional manipulation.
Welcome to the realm of pragmatics, where the literal dictionary definition of the words is entirely secondary to the speaker's hidden attitude.
This is the best part. So let's examine the most striking pragmatic comparison in the notes. We have 2 sentences describing the exact same historical reality. Sentence 1, she complained a lot.
Yeah.
Sentence 2, she was always complaining. Now, factually, objectively, those are identical. A person voiced dissatisfaction frequently in the past.
Right.
But anyone who speaks English knows instantly that the second sentence sounds infinitely more annoyed.
Oh, it drips with irritation.
It really does.
And as advanced learners, you have to ask the critical question. Why? Why? Why does adding an ing suffix in the word always suddenly transform a neutral observation into a complaint?
I really want you to unpack the linguistic friction there because, complained a lot sounds like a clinical report. She was always complaining. It sounds like you are venting to a bartender. What is happening in the brain?
It comes down to deliberately breaking the rules we established earlier.
Really?
Yeah. Remember how we said the continuous lens is specifically designed for a temporary ongoing action? It's the scene's background.
Right, the canvas. It's meant to be interrupted.
Well, what happens when you combine a tense meant for temporary actions with an adverb like always or constantly, which means permanent?
Oh.
You're taking 2 fundamentally incompatible concepts and smashing them together. It creates a literal linguistic contradiction in the listener's brain.
A syntactic spark.
Exactly. That cognitive friction is what translates to human annoyance. You are grammatically signaling that this temporary action overstayed its welcome. You leave the realm of objective facts and enter the realm of speaker attitude.
So by choosing to say she was always complaining, I'm subconsciously telling the listener, her complaining was so persistent and so incredibly irritating that it felt like an endless, unbroken background noise to my entire existence.
Yes, you are weaponizing the continuous tense to broadcast your annoyance.
Yeah.
It is hyperbole coded directly into the grammar.
That is fascinating. You're manipulating the syntax to force the listener to side with your emotional state.
Absolutely.
I want to loop back to that painful memory we started with.
The teenager writing the essay, bleeding red ink.
Yeah, that one. We actually have some very specific phrasing for how we talk about those old memories. For example, when I was a teenager, I used to mix all my tenses up. Every time I wrote an essay, my teacher would underline half the verbs in red.
This raises an important question about how we construct our personal histories, especially for advanced users of the language.
Right. Notice that we aren't using the simple past there. We didn't say I mixed them up or the teacher underlined them.
No, we are using very specific structures,
Yeah.
used to and would, and they are doing something much more sophisticated than just recounting a timeline.
I have to stop you there, though. I hear what you're saying, but honestly, used to and would, don't they mean the exact same thing?
A lot of people assume they do.
Like, I used to walk to the store, I would walk to the store. It sounds like we are just splitting hairs. Does anyone actually notice a difference?
It might feel like splitting hairs on the surface, but the pragmatics of choosing one over the other is a massive part of advanced storytelling. It completely changes the viewpoint aspect.
Really?
Yes, they do not do the exact same job. Used to is fantastic for establishing a broad baseline. It describes past states of being or extended habits that are no longer true. It tells the listener, I am establishing an era.
Okay, so I used to mix them up. Establishes the baseline state of my chaotic teenage years.
Exactly.
It's like pulling a dusty box down from the attic and saying, this was my reality back then.
It creates a sharp contrast between that past era and the present day. But now, look at the second half of the memory. My teacher would underline half the verbs.
Right, we shift away from used to.
Why? Because while used to builds the era, would is almost exclusively used for repeated active behaviors.
Wait, really? So I couldn't say, my teacher would be angry.
Generally, no. Would doesn't work well with static states of being. It works with action. Think about the origin of the word would. It is tied to will and intention.
Oh, that makes sense.
When you say my teacher would underline, it brings a very specific rhythm to the narrative. It paints a picture of a characteristic, almost ritualistic action.
Like you can vividly picture the teacher sitting down, sighing, deliberately taking the cap off the red pen, and systematically marking the paper over and over again.
Good, exactly.
Okay, I actually see the distinction now. It makes the memory feel more active, more alive.
It really does.
Used to is the framing of the era, but would is the specific repeated action happening inside that frame. It's like back when I used to live in the city, I would walk to the coffee shop every morning. The used to builds the theater set, and the would is the actor actually walking across the stage.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. Used to is the set design, would is the animation.
Wow.
And choosing would often carries a deeply nostalgic or characteristic tone. It dictates whether we are just objectively describing a discontinued state of affairs, or if we are fondly or perhaps trauma-inducingly reminiscing about the predictable quirks of the people in our past.
It shows how deeply tied these habitual structures are to a speaker's specific viewpoint.
Which logically leads to how we understand the rules of those past eras. There's another layer here involving conditionals.
Right, and for anyone who glazes over at the word conditional, we are just talking about if-then statements, cause and effect. The example is, if I didn't do my homework, my teacher used to get angry.
And that perfectly synthesizes our entire discussion about perspective. That conditional sentence isn't really about time at all.
What is it about then?
It is about establishing the predictable mechanics of a past reality. It shows the connection between events. No homework equals angry teacher.
It shows emotion, the fear or the inevitability of that anger.
And above all, it shows viewpoint. This is how the speaker understood the laws of gravity in their world at that specific time.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive looking at an essay covered in red ink, feeling like past tenses were just arbitrary, rigid traps set by grammarians to make us miserable.
And it turns out they aren't traps at all.
Right. We've seen that moving from I missed the bus to I have been waiting for an hour, or from she complained to she was always complaining isn't just about passing a history test. It is an incredibly dynamic system.
The language provides the canvas and the colors. The tenses are simply how we choose to wield the brush.
Yeah, whether you realize it or not, you shape how your stories are received by instinctively knowing when to show a snapshot, when to roll the video camera, and when to let your past echo into your present.
You are using these subtle tools every single day.
You use them to inject your emotions into a story, to stretch out the duration of your suffering, and to build invisible tethers between the events of your life. It really makes you rethink every conversation you've ever had.
It really does.
Which leaves me with a thought for you to take with you today. The next time someone is telling you a story, maybe a friend is venting about a frustrating coworker, or a family member is reminiscing about their childhood, Don't just listen to the raw facts of what they are saying.
Pay close attention to the verbs they choose.
Exactly. Are they trapping you in an endless, past, continuous loop of their own annoyance? Are they using wood to paint a highly nostalgic picture of someone's predictable, irritating habits?
What hidden emotions, old grudges, or lingering connections to the past are they secretly revealing to you without even realizing they are doing it?
The clues are all there, hiding right in plain sight.